Oh, I'm gonna have to invite you to the live on Facebook, okay?
We live already?
On YouTube, yes, but not on Facebook as yet.
Okay.
Mm. Yes, greetings everyone, and thank you once again for tuning in to Unity and Solidarity TV. My name is Bakari Makaru, and I have the honor and pleasure to serve as your host today. Now, for those of you who might be familiar, Unity and Solidarity TV strives to bring information with regards to our story as an African people, right, and highlight contemporary issues from the continent to the diaspora with the hope of raising awareness and that person's viewers will have developed an acute interest in learning more about their cultural heritage. And of course, to implement the ideas where it pertains to self determination and self reliance for us as a people. Now, I want to make mention that we have a number of podcasts coming up. Of course, today we are going to be having a very, very interesting conversation with none other than Miss Xiomara Balentina. Tomorrow, Monday, July 29th, I will be joined by the staff of the St. Martin Museum, and we will be highlighting the question of identity, nation building, and national development, right? So that's something you definitely want to tune in for. And then next Sunday, which is August the 4th, 2024 at 11 a.m., I will be joined by Mr. Renate Bryson, who is the Secretary General of the Pro Swaliga Foundation. And we are going to be talking or exchanging ideas where it pertains to combating vote selling on St. Martin. All right, because many of you might be aware of the fact that elections is around the corner, and ever so often we hear rumors, we hear allegations, we hear stories about the infamous vote buying that is alleged to take place. I say alleged because I'm not an investigator, right? And I have not done any intense research as yet in this regard. So we are also streaming on Facebook. I have to find a way to invite my guest to be part of the Facebook stream. I'm not seeing that as yet. Um, let me see. Shamana, you're already on Facebook?
I'm on
You're on
Facebook,
Facebook
yes.
already?
I'm seeing you live.
Yeah, okay.
Hmm.
You're seeing me live. Okay. There should be a button where I can invite you, but I'm not seeing it, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Oh boy. Okay, no worries. Then we'll just have to continue. All right, let me see. Share link. No, we just have to continue via YouTube. Okay,
Okay.
and then we just share the link. All right,
Okay.
we end with that. Okay, and one final announcement I have is, of course, I would invite everyone to visit the Facebook page. Visit the Facebook page of Mindful Elevation Caribbean, and there you will find a host of different interviews ranging on conflict resolution, relationships, stress management, and the list goes on and on. And of course, it is hosted by none other than Dr. Anders Ramonda Hansa, certified life coach. And of course, if you enjoy yoga, then you definitely have to get in contact with her, as she is also a certified yoga instructor. So check out her page on Mindful Elevation Caribbean on Facebook, right? And then, of course, you can always feel free to contact her to inquire more about her services and possibly any other type of support that you may be interested in. Um, so again, we are going to be streaming live on our YouTube channel. I'll just put the link where persons can find it on our Facebook page. And of course, if persons want to make a comment or maybe even join the discussion, we can also accommodate them, to hear from our listeners today. So, family, um, our podcast today is dedicated to the Honorable Franz Fanon, who I consider one of the greatest thinkers the Caribbean civilization has produced. For many of us, we hold July 20th as a very important date in our calendar because July 20th, 2024, would have been his 99th Earth Strong. But of course, he has transitioned and became an ancestor. Many will agree that Fanon's life and ideas and body of works inspired many African leaders and movements, including the Black Panthers, Brother Stokely Carmichael, Steve Biko, and countless others. So therefore, we could not allow this important date, this important occasion to pass by without discussing his life, his journey, and his ideas, especially where it pertains to our reality here on St. Martin, an island that is still controlled by The Hague, an island that is still controlled by France. And with me to discuss this very important topic is none other than my revolutionary comrade, Miss Xiomara Balentina. Xiomara, greetings, and of course, thanks again for joining us here on Unity and Solidarity TV. And yeah, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you very much, Brother Bakari, for having me. I like the way you introduced Brother Franz Fanon. Indeed, I agree with you. He was a very, very important thinker of our time and even before our time. And, you have to feel proud because he came from the Caribbean region as well. And I believe that there's so many similarities between the things he talked about and what we or our ancestors experienced and what we are still experiencing today. So I'm really looking forward to having a very great conversation with you about some of his very key ideas.
Yes, excellent. So let's get right into it. No, before we do that,
Mhm.
who is Xiomara Balentina?
Who is Xiomara Balentina?
Yes.
Born and raised on the island of St. Eustatius, attended school on Statia, came to St. Martin, attended Milton Peters. I did the HAVO here, did the VVO here. Then I went to the Netherlands where I studied psychology. I specialized in family therapy, behavioral therapy. After having lived in the Netherlands for 16 years, I returned to St. Martin and I'm currently working here as a psychologist and also a family therapist. But I believe, besides my profession, I would want to believe that there's much more to me. I am someone who believes in community. I consider myself to be a community activist. I believe in the preservation of our cultural values and heritage. And in my work, I try to bring that forward. So that's just a bit about me. I think also important to know is that I have Kittitian roots. I have roots from Curacao, hence my name. But I was born on and raised in Station. So I am a Station living on St. Martin.
And just to add a bit more, right? Do you feel comfortable letting us know which organizations that you are part of? Because you said that you believe in community activism. So maybe you might want to highlight that also.
Sure, sure. Brighter Path Foundation, I was the president of that foundation for many years, and we were fighting for autonomy for syntestatious. The conversation still continues. In those years, we organized a lot of activities around raising the consciousness around the issue of self-determination. I am currently part of the St. Martin Foundation for Psychologists and Orthopedagogen, along with some others, where we believe in a culture sensitive approach to psychology and pedagogy. So we are doing things in that area. And currently, I am also the chairperson of the Statia Cultural Heritage Implementation Committee. What's important in that is that, and I'm sure you've heard about it, Brother Bakari, 69 ancestral remains were discovered from the Golden Rock plantation site. Statia had a lot of plantations. They are above the ground. There were a lot of protests around how they were excavated and why. And so we are now tasked with finding a resting place for them and giving them the dignity and the honor that they deserve. So that is a whole activity in and of itself. So those are some of the things that I do. I'm also part of Carib Research. That is a foundation that has members from all the 6 islands. And we believe that as Caribbean people, we need to center ourselves in our research and everything that we do. So I'm also busy in that area as well.
Wow. Okay, give thanks. Give thanks. Give thanks, I think it's important. I think it's important for ones and ones to know, not only about your very active involvement when it comes to struggle, but that they become aware of what's happening sometimes right across from the island, you see, because the situation with finding the remains of our ancestors on your island is something that cannot be taken for granted at all, at all. So I remain very inspired, when I read the accounts of all of the efforts, the ongoing efforts to protect and preserve and not allow them to be, abused by historians, researchers,
That's right.
archaeologists. You
That's right.
understand? Because this can't be done in other communities.
No.
You see, it can be done in other communities. And again, I don't know what it is, but it's like every time you kick over a rock, you find something in Stacia.
Yeah,
And
because Statia is only 11 square miles and Statia had 76 plantations. So just
wow.
imagine it. It's one big plantation.
Yes, yes. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Now, in your words, who is Franz Fanon and what does he mean to you?
Wow. When you approached me about joining you on this podcast, I said, oh my God, Franz Fanon, such a complex individual, but his work is therapeutic. It is therapeutic because it highlights our condition, the psychological effects that colonialism and racism has had on our people. And so, because of that, he means a whole lot to me. By studying his work, it helps me to raise my consciousness. And you ask yourself the question who he was. As you have said, he was from the Caribbean. He was born actually in Martinique. He came from a middle class family. And this is what I thought was so interesting. When I was preparing for this, I read that in Martinique at the time, because he was born in
25.
1925. And in Martinique at the time, seeing that he came from this middle class family, there was something very interesting happening in the middle class in Martinique. And the interesting thing is that they assimilated. They really tried to adapt everything French, the values, the traditions, the language. And that is something that stuck with him. When he was reflecting on his life, he thought of the role that um, colonization had on French society and the middle class. At a given moment, we know he left Martinique and he enrolled actually in the French army. He was 18 at the time. So he was a soldier as well. And then after that, he went on to study at a French university. He studied psychiatry, and he did that. He started in 1946, and then he started to treat Algerian soldiers, because at the time, there was this thing going on between Algeria and France, because Algeria was a colony of France. And he experienced in France and in working with Algerian soldiers what impact colonization really had on Black people there in that space. And the interesting thing is, I think that Franz Fanon at a given moment experienced something that caused him to participate in the struggle for independence in Algeria. So he did that. He quit his job and then he went to do that. The interesting thing about him, he died in December 1961. I think he was only like 35, 36 years old. But in his short lifespan, Bakari, he contributed to this world in so many ways. And he wrote books, and two of his very influential books, in my view, are the books Black Skin, White Mask. And we're going to touch on some of the things in that book to address the psychological effects of colonization and racism when it comes to Black people. And also the book Wretched of the Earth. We're going to use those two books also to talk about, but how did he envision the way forward? Yes, we were colonized, but what was his idea? So we'll talk about that too. The thing that I love about Franz Fanon, and I will get back to that as the conversation continues, he was such a multifaceted man. He was not just a psychiatrist. He was a writer. He was an editor. He was a revolutionary, you know? And that's the thing that I love about him. And I try to emulate that too. I am not sticking just to my field, I think that we can take his example and do different things at the same time, not just stick to one thing. It makes life so boring if we just put ourselves in that one box. So those are some of the things that really stand out about him, and that's a bit about how I see him.
And it's so powerful. Okay, I'm hearing that echo again. I don't know what is it. You're not hearing the echo on my side, correct?
I'm not hearing it. I
Okay.
don't know if others are, but I'm not hearing it.
Yeah, then maybe it's on my side then. But I really don't know what it could be. Right? In any case, what is also interesting was that we see the young Franz Fanon totally oblivious to the role that Africans played in Martinique.
Yeah.
When you read his, well, at least one of his autobiographies, they talk about he was under the impression that freedom was given.
Yeah.
It was like, without any revolution and such. It was, just freely given. And of course, they have now become French citizens. You see? And just to go back to about what you was talking about colonial Martinique, was that even the cemeteries was segregated.
Yeah.
So you had a cemetery for the well-to-do, and you had those who were basically working class, or the poorer people. So that in itself gave me a glimpse, right, of it. But what was interesting was that just like what we were talking about off air, he had some good mentors. He was exposed to some very good mentors early on in his life. And the first name that comes to mind would have been his school teacher or principal, Amos Césaire.
Correct.
And when we read again his autobiography, it says that Amos Césaire told him, don't go and fight because that's not your war. You understand? He told him that. So he was exposed to the whole negritude movement and the ideas and such, but because he identified as a result of the years of indoctrination, he identified with Europe. So he
Yeah,
felt as though his future and destiny was linked and inseparable from that of Europe.
that's right. And then just to add, if you have read both of those books, Black Skin, White Mask, and then you have to read Black Skin, White Mask before you read Wretched of the Earth,
Yes, that's right.
because Franz Fanon goes through what I call an evolution.
Mm-hmm.
His ideas initially, he was this humanist. We need to get along. Um, the colonist and the colonized, we have to find this common ground. We have to, you know, acknowledge each other's humanity.
Yes.
You know, but then based on his experiences in Martinique and also in France and then in Algeria, you realize that a shift took place within him. And then he became the revolutionary. And then it was not anymore about kumbaya, we have to get along, but it was about Black people taking a stand, you know, and becoming agents of their own lives, taking charge of their own lives and their own destiny. So for me, while reading about him and reading his books, I thought that evolution was so amazing. And I think that is part of the human condition. And I think it's awesome when we can experience that. We are not always the same based on experiences, everything, persons we encounter. Sometimes this evolution takes place for the better. And I think that was the case with Franz Fanon, and also having these great mentors as well. This evolution took place. So for me, that is what really stood out. He started out at point A, but then he moved and then he came to point M, for example. That's evolution, that's growth.
And
Mhm.
just to link it with no, I'm really okay. Xiomara, just hold on for a minute or two. Let me see what's happening here. Viewers, don't go nowhere. I just need to examine what's happening on my side. It seems to be having it's like somebody don't want us have this conversation today. So let's get just hold on. Let me just out my camera, out my mic. Okay. It sounds a little better now, right?
I wasn't hearing the
Oh yeah,
echo.
you wasn't okay. I was hearing it on my side. Right? Okay. What I'm very anxious to point out, Shamara,
Mhm.
is when we look at, for example, the life of Malcolm X, we see that he starts off as Malcolm Little. He becomes Detroit Red. He moves on to become Malcolm X. And then his life culminates as El Hajj Malik Shabazz of Omawali. And each we can compartmentalize his life, you see, and because we know what happened when he was a child separated from family, um father is martyred and so forth, and through becoming aware he was able now to recreate his identity and move on to become, one of the greatest leaders. Marcus Garvey, the same thing.
Same.
You
Mhm.
see? So that is something what I truly appreciate, about these stories, because it gives us an example that when it comes to the human soul, you can never ever say that it has reached its plateau. It's always trying to evolve and transcend that which we thought was its ceiling. You understand? So
Wonderfully said.
yeah, man, give thanks. I had to put that in there because some people, when they're discussing Fanon, they are quick to label him as a traitor.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? But we're gonna get into that. We can get into that. We
Yeah.
can get into that, you know. But I like how we started off by laying the foundation. I
Yeah.
like how you touched upon some of his ideas and his
Mm-hmm.
crucial works. And I love that you advised persons to read Black Skin, White Mask first, because the author of Black Skin, White Mask is totally different than the author of Wretched of the Earth.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And we are not even going to talk about his other works on the African Revolution. And the book, to me, one of my favorites is Dying Colonialism.
Mm-hmm. And
Because
I'm
in
still to
there,
read that.
in that book, he details in graphic terms, what it's like to be behind enemy lines
Hmm.
and the various guerrilla tactics they had to use in order to execute the armed struggle.
Yeah.
You see? But let's
Yeah.
jump into Black Skin, White Mass.
Yeah.
All right. Highlight for us some of your favorite texts, and maybe we can get
Yeah.
to a
Yeah.
discussion.
So what I was thinking is that we touch on the psychological effects of colonization on Black people, where we
Yes.
address three areas: language, education, and identity. And we can certainly start with language, where I will read some quotes. We talk about it and we draw parallels to our current
Yes.
condition. Because the amazing thing about Franz Fanon, his life and his work, we can draw parallels with our condition because we are part of the Dutch kingdom. We experienced colonization. Actually, it started with enslavement and then colonization, and then the French values, and in our case, Dutch values. So there are a lot of parallels. So if we look at language, it starts off, there's a chapter on language that starts off like this: we attach a fundamental importance to the phenomenon of language and consequently consider the study of language essential for providing us with one element in understanding the Black man's dimension of being for others. It being understood that to speak is to exist absolutely for the other. And then he goes on: the Black man entering France reacts against the myth of the Martinican who swallows his R's, because there's this idea in Martinique that when they speak, you don't hear their R's. So the Black man in France, what he'll do is he'll go to work on it and enter into open conflict with it. He will make every effort not only to roll his R's, but also to make them stand out. And then there's another part that I think is interesting that I could identify with. There's nothing comparable in the French Antilles. The official language is French. Elementary school teachers keep a close eye on their pupils to make sure they are not speaking Creole.
Mm.
They are not there, so they are the guardians of this French language, making sure that they do not speak Creole. You see, Franz Fanon Badabakari refers to language as a cultural tool. It is a cultural tool, for he says to speak a language is to appropriate its world and its culture.
I was waiting for that one. I
Yes.
was waiting for that quote.
So to speak a language means it appropriates its world and its culture. So when we're talking about the psychological effects of colonization and language, the Martinican looked down on his own language, his own Creole language, and felt it necessary to embrace French. And then when you go to France, it's very important that you show that you can speak French, because to speak French is to be white. We'll talk about that. So I just thought that that is so fascinating. And then when we draw the parallels, Brother Bakari, to our present condition, we need to ask ourselves the question: What are our attitudes today in 2024 on all these islands, all the 6 islands? What is our attitude towards the Dutch language? It's a question I have. What are our attitudes towards, as we say, our Sematin English, or in my case, Statia English, or our English Creole? What are our attitudes towards that? What is the role, Brother Bakari, of the Dutch language within government, within education, within the legal system? Because now we are drawing parallels.
Yes, it's to maintain hegemony. It's to maintain hegemony, and it also serves to exclude a great portion of your population from participating in certain sectors. You understand what I'm saying?
That's
And,
right.
and like for example, I would have learned that in the past all of the laws were in Dutch. There was a great effort to translate those laws to make it accessible, right? But the interesting part is that where the English version fails, one has to revert to
Back
the
to
Dutch translation. So you can see that it either which way, despite the effort, right? In the final analysis, it is this language which determines how you interpret a particular situation.
and
You
interpret
know,
the word.
how
So
you
what
interpret the
what we
word.
have done is we have centered the Dutch language. It's part of our being. And those, as you say, who cannot speak it are excluded from certain functions. For example, there are certain governmental functions that require us to be able to speak the Dutch language. If not, then that's a problem. I heard a parliamentarian recently on the floor of parliament talking about the fact that there's a shortage of police officers. But problem being that not everyone would have access to the police academy because the Dutch language is required. So those are very interesting things. But there's also something else that I want to touch on. Our attitudes towards our own Creole language. We say we speak bad English and we correct children. Our language is not what we speak is not, it's compared to something else. It's like we are not beings outside of this standard, which
Correct.
is there's the standard English, and everything else that falls outside of that is less than. And it is
Mm-hmm.
the same thing that the Martinican, and I'm sure the Guadeloupean, the Saint Martina, the Curaçaoian at that time experience. But there's something amazing about Curaçao, Aruba, and Bonaire. They have their own
Yeah.
Creole, and I think that
Yes.
they're proud of their language. I really want
Oh
to know,
yes. Oh
you
yes.
know. But there's something about us in our daily discourse that makes us believe that how we speak, the Creole that we speak, is subpar. So we teach our children, or we correct them. You better stop speaking like that. That's bad English. Stop saying so. Stop saying that. Bad. Speak proper. I recently heard it about 2 weeks ago. Someone said to me, yeah, but the way these children here, they speak really bad, and you have to speak proper English. So our attitudes towards our own language, which is Creole, a kind of Creole, say something about our condition in the here and now. And as you said, the Dutch language is used as an exclusionary tool. It's actually a cultural tool. And by speaking it, you bring the culture, the Dutch culture stays alive.
To the forefront, of course. Of course. But you know what's also interesting is the fact that the island, the economy, the one pillar economy thrives on tourism. And most of the tourists come from the North American market. What's always interesting to me is that persons who I would have gone to school with, known all my life, the moment they gain employment in a tourism related area, something magical happens.
Yeah.
Their accent, their Swaligan accent, somehow rescinds, it goes somewhere to the back, and another accent emerges. And some of them are able to do this seamlessly. Okay, it amazes me sometimes to the point where when I would have a conversation with them, it's as though they forgot to switch it off and it stays. So you're hearing the yanking, you're hearing the terminologies, you're hearing everything. And a part of me, I wonder whether our tourists are coming to hear their ideas, if they're coming to hear their accents, or are they coming to hear ours?
It's
You
right.
see? And
It's
because
right.
I am proud of the way how I speak,
Yes.
the way how I pronounce words, I want you to have a taste of our rich heritage and culture.
You know, what you're saying there is so profound. You know, it's we continue to take on the persona of the other, the standard, because if we embrace who we truly are, we are afraid that the other won't accept us. Well, actually, we don't
Correct.
accept ourselves because that's where it actually starts. When I was living in the Netherlands, because I told you I lived in the Netherlands for 16 years, of course, I speak Dutch, but I'm going to tell you, I made a conscious effort to speak Dutch with the accent. Because some of us, we go to the Netherlands, and yes, we speak
Oh
Dutch, but
gosh. Be
you
careful.
if
Xiomara, be careful.
if I'm on the telephone with you, I can't tell where you're from. You know, I thinking you're from from Europe itself. There's no
Mm,
distinction. But then the thing that is so interesting about that is that we assimilate. Remember, we talked about the middle class, how they assimilate, but the
yes.
other who is perceived as more powerful, they do not assimilate, but we assimilate. And that says something about power. And it says something about the colonial condition. When the colonizer meets the colonized, something toxic happens. And then we lose ourselves because of the practices of the colonizer and us not being aware of what's taking place and want to repress certain parts of ourselves in order to survive, in order to become like. That is what happens. And we do not realize that it plays out in the here and now. We are not aware of it. And and I'm so happy that you brought up that example because I won't say the name. There's a person who I tease about switching into an American accent all the time. I will say, girl, what's wrong with you? Speak your Samaritan English, you know?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that you mentioned that.
And let me also add, and that's the reason why I said I am happy that you brought up that particular quote about the language and how you have to appropriate a worldview. Because even on a micro level, it's very, I mean, you're into psychology, so you're going to love this. Even the way how we fix our mouth to pronounce words in a different language to express a particular worldview, it is identical as that of the colonizer. Whenever you get a chance, I mean, maybe you've seen it, but I have seen it that when persons, let's say from the island, they go abroad, they
Mm-hmm.
live in Europe, whatever have you, of
Mm-hmm.
course, you're going to come in contact, but in an effort, right, to participate, they have like literally taken on to some extent a new identity. So
That's
from your
correct.
values to the language to the way how you express your facial expression is identical to those who you are. I don't want to say imitating, but who you are reflecting.
Because of colonization, self-alienation takes place. All
That's
these are
right.
ideas of Franz Fanon too.
That's right.
So we repress the blackness. It's there. We know it's there, but we repress it because we can't change the color of our skin. but we embrace the whiteness through our actions, the way we speak, the way we dress, the way we structure our educational system. Hence, black skin, white mask. You know,
Yes.
that is a psychological effect of that. And in talking about that, I would want us to touch on education too, because Franz
Sure.
Fanon and some others had something to say about what the colonial education does to us, and we don't pay attention to that. Then I will quote again here. Let me go to the other page that I have on education. Yes, in the Antilles, the black schoolboy who is constantly asked to recite our ancestors, the Gauls, identifies himself with the explorer, the civilizing colonizer, the white man who brings truth to the savages, a lily white truth. The identification process means that the black child subjectively adopts a white man's attitude. That is so profound. There is a African psychologist, and I'm sure that a lot of us who study psychology probably never heard of the man because this is part of our educational indoctrination. Naim Akbar, in his book
Mm.
Know Thyself,
Oh
he
boy, favorite,
he
favorite.
said, education is not a universal affair, you know. Education means one should mean one thing for one group of people and another thing for the other group of people. So it doesn't mean the same for all people. However, what has happened to us in our spaces here in the Caribbean and in other places that have experienced enslavement and colonization is that we have adopted the American and the European form of education. And then Akbar says that the American European form of education promotes the development of their own identity. You know, he talks about how their storybooks, the images in them, the stories told, the problems brought forward, and the solutions sought are all centered around their identity. Now, what happens to a black child in such a society? What happened to the black child back then in Martinique? And what happened to the black child in St. Martin in that time? What happened to the black child in St. Eustatius? And what happens to the black child in St. Martin, in St. Eustatius, in Sabre, on the French side, in this moment? What storybooks are we using? Who are the authors? What stories are told? What are the characters? Whose faces are we seeing? Whose theories are being taught? And what solutions, whose solutions are being brought forward? Education helps to form identity.
That's right.
And if we emulate the education of the other, aren't we not embracing their values and their identity? Education is also a cultural tool. So if we are embracing their values and their identity, does that not then, Brother Bakari, lead to the further alienation of ourselves?
Of course.
This is serious, you know. It's a serious, serious thing. So I
And,
don't know
and
what
and
you
next
think.
to that,
Mhm.
and next to that, right? Because we've incorporated these values, these ideas in this world view, it means that whatever we do will contribute towards the reproduction of their particular civilization at the
Right.
expense of ours.
That's
You
right.
see? Because
That's
we
right.
cannot imagine a world not being part of the Dutch Empire. We can't imagine a world where we no longer have a relationship with Paris because we feel as though we are one. And this is something that I love about Fanon.
Mhm.
To me, he was very honest and he wasn't afraid of showing you, right, what his experiences were.
No.
because we see that, of course, he was the torchbearer for France. And when he went to France, and this is in Black Skin, White Mask, when he went to France, and the white girl says, Mama, look, a black man, a nigger, I'm afraid. And when he went in the army and he experienced firsthand the racism and discrimination, he came to the point that he said, you all are all over the world talking about liberty and respect and republic and everything. But at the end of the day, I'm still a nigger.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you pride yourself of being liberal and so forth, but you are slaughtering millions of Algerians.
That's correct.
You see? So because he had that first-hand experience,
That's right.
combined with combined with the other instances, I think that played an instrumental role. And again, mentorship.
Yeah, we're gonna touch on that.
Well,
That's important.
yeah,
Yeah.
because his professor, because he went and studied in Lyon in France. And at that time, Lyon was like the majority was like white of a certain class and so forth. And I think in his autobiography, he said something to the effect like he wanted to go there in order to test and challenge certain, ideas that he had. But he went and studied under this particular professor from the south of Spain who really opened up his eyes,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to community psychology and so forth and so on. You see? And so that's why you touched upon this offline, but you're gonna have to say it here for the edification of our viewers. The importance of having good mentors, good people around you to, or how you say,
Yeah.
ignite that consciousness. I need you to speak on that because I have some people who I have to shout out.
Yeah. That is then part of the question that he asks, well, that he addresses, how do we move forward from here? That's part of the decolonization process. And part of that process, what I like about his work, and he lived it, you have to bring things to someone's consciousness. We repress certain things because it's too painful.
That's
It
right.
gives us a neurosis. We kind of like repress these things. But he believed that in order for us to move forward, in order for us to heal, you need to bring things to the surface. You know that iceberg, you have these things under the
Yes,
water and then above.
yes,
You have to bring them to the surface. So, and that is definitely what he did. So I think the role of mentors, and we are not just talking about any Tom, Dick, and Harry, or Jane
that's
and
right.
Jane, Janique. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people who understand where we have come from, where we are now, and where we should go in the future. People who can uplift our spirit, people who can help us to see things through different eyes, people who are helping us to recenter ourselves in our own identities, who we were before colonization. Those are the mentors. So in this day and age, we have to look around us and see who are these people within our own community, within our own spaces, because these are the people through conversations with us. And I'm speaking from experience too, because I didn't reach this where I am right now in my journey. It certainly didn't happen in European university. It
There you
certainly
go.
didn't have happened there. I had to step out. But it was because there were people around me who pointed certain things out to me. So mentorship around this aspect is so important because they help us to become aware of our condition so that we can truly move forward. And as I told you offline, you are one of those persons through your podcast. You are raising our consciousness. You are bringing the unconscious to the surface. But there are others in this St. Martin space,
That's
like
right.
like Suja Ref. His program, Conscious Lyrics, what he have been doing for years. Suja, whenever he speaks, he tries to raise our consciousness, even with the organization of his book fair. He tries to raise our consciousness. But you have others. Lasana Sekou. He is a keeper of, of St. Martin culture. That's a mentor. There are so many others in this here Caribbean space on St. Martin and in other islands who serve as mentors, who we need as mentors to help us to raise our consciousness. We must not underestimate the importance of mentors, because I believe when we go back, that is how Franz Fanon, that is what helped him to evolve his personal
That's right.
experiences, his mentors. But even if we go back to who we were before enslavement, we always had mentors.
That's right.
It's part of who we are. So in order for us to reclaim ourselves, that's some of the things that we have to practice today.
That's so true. And you
Yeah.
know, I know you are very passionate about education.
Yes.
And I can say proudly that one of my aha moments was a direct result of my fifth grade teacher.
Mm.
You understand? And I'm 42.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I take my fifth grade teacher, then you know we are a few
Way
decades.
back.
You understand?
Mhm.
And I bring it up, right? I bring it up for the sole reason that teachers have an instrumental role to play in that aha moment,
That's correct.
and they cannot underestimate that, because I remember being in fifth grade, my teacher Green, who I call my second mother, she would have told me about Fanon. She would have told me about Walter Rodney. But of course, I was young, so you weren't really putting it together. So I would have learned about these great heroes and sheroes from fifth grade. All
Mhm.
right. And of course, I don't know how it end up, possibly providence, possibly coincidence. We ended up being together again in Sundial School, and the education continued. And one thing
Imagine.
she always told me was that, you have to read twice as much when you go to Holland. You understand? You have to stay ahead.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid of new information. And so I can already hear her voice. You
Yeah.
see? So when I
Mhm.
went to Europe now, a lot of things became real,
Mhm.
because you go to Europe, and to be more specific, Holland, and they are asking you questions whether you have electricity in your house.
Mhm.
They are asking what you guys do besides laying on the beach and eating coconut jelly all day.
Mhm.
You see? And there were so many other remarks, and they can be very sarcastic, that
Mhm.
group of people. And they would have always let you know that you're black.
Oh yeah.
But before I left, I figured I was a Dutch citizen. I learned about Willem Helmus. I learned about I had we had to learn the anthem by heart. You understand what I'm saying? We learned about Limburg, and we learned about Maastricht, and we learned about all of these things. And we are getting sevens for Dutch, and we're getting good grades for Dutch. And when you reach to Holland, you realize that your Dutch and their Dutch is not the same.
That's
It's
right.
not. It's not the same. You
That's
see,
right.
you're being educated about them, but they're not being educated about you, which is proof that it was meant to be an unequal relationship.
That's right. And
You
Franz
see,
Fanon addressed that. And there's something I want to say though. For me, my teachers were not teachers in school, because I believe that
that's
teachers
true.
comes in every form, shape, and sizes.
That's
One
right.
of the teachers, I still have teachers today, but one of the teachers that I know helped me to really realize, hey, there's more to you than just that space, was Paul Spanner, Joshua Spanner
Okay.
in
Okay.
Statia. This man would send me books in the mail. Back then, in the Netherlands, you would you have the mail. He would post books to me, and these books were about
Mm,
Black civilization. And I was like, why he sending me these things? You see, he knew I was studying in the Netherlands, but I think he realized that it was important for me to also realize where I am coming from. He served as a very important mentor in my life. He probably doesn't know, but he served as a very important mentor. And to this day, Brother
mm.
Bakari, there are a lot of people older than me who still serve as my mentors, and they are not formal teachers, they are not psychologists, they are not doctors, they are not lawyers. their neighbors and their parents of and their grandparents of. And these are the people who helped me in this day and age. And in talking about, I'm looking at the time, in talking about moving forward and the call to action, where Franz Fanon talks about this consciousness, because that's how it started with him, being aware. And then he talks about the call to action. And then in The Wretched of the Earth, he says that decolonization helps to create new men. And it means that he's saying, he believed, though, that we had to dismantle the Western system, the Western values. In his time, that made sense because we know in which period he was operating. And he said we need to eradicate it. He said, because if we simply strive for political independence without liberating our minds, without dismantling that system, he said all we will be doing is, yeah, we would be politically independent, but we would still be taking over Western values, and Western values are violent towards us because Western values is, as he said, were all about inequality, discrimination, egoism, capitalism to the detriment of. And he said, in creating a new society, in becoming new men and new women, we have to think about things like brotherhood, Bakari, um, collective, working together as a collective, those humanistic things. He said those are the values that we need to embrace. A common cause. These are the things that we need to embrace in order for us to create new men, new women, and a society that we envision. And the next thing, in talking about moving forward, and we touch a lot on education. We need to, in our space, envision the type of educational system that we truly want. I'm not saying that we have to eradicate everything Western, don't get me wrong, because that's very difficult. But at the same time, we are called to action to start centering ourselves. What do I mean by that? When it comes to education, I'm not only looking at the formal education, because that's there, but education takes place in different places, in different spaces, different spaces. We need to come to a place where when we give our children books to read, children need to see not only our faces, but children need to identify with the problems that we have in our community. And children need to realize that there are people in this community who also have the solutions to certain problems. Because what we do in education is we use international problem solving strategies to solve local problems. So we really need to start centering ourselves and having our heroes talk to our children about our heroes, about our values, our traditions, bring our grandparents into the classroom if we go over to the formal space, but informally, these small groups, we teach our children really the values of who we are. And actually, we need to start writing more and more of our books. Because when you and I write, and I'm busy with that, when you and I write, like Ralph Contav has done, and he's sharing his books with the children of St. Martin, that helps also to decolonize. That helps also to help us to reclaim who we are, within the educational system. So we really need to start thinking about what we want to do. And another aspect that I think is important when it comes to our education system, and I was telling you this offline, the very way that Franz Fanon lived his life, right? He was so many other things and not just a psychiatrist. The type of educational system we have now, when we go into universities and so, we are taught to specialize in one thing, and that's all we focus on. But if education is to be holistic, I think we can pattern after his life and tapping into different things and different sources. Because when he came with his ideas, he didn't stick to psychiatry alone, he didn't stick to Freud, psychoanalysis, because that was the theory he was using. But he got ideas from the negritude movement, from Marxism, and those are things that he incorporated. And there's one other important aspect I want to talk about with education. When I said he didn't stick to one thing, and he was so many other things, we can think of, I told you, Imhotep, right? He was this official, in Egypt at the time. He helped out the pharaoh. Imhotep had knowledge in medicine and astrology. He was so many different things. That's the type of educational system that I think we should start thinking about, because we could even look closer to ourselves. Our grandparents and our great grandparents, they were not just grandparents, they were nurses, they were psychologists, they were doctors, they were medicine women, they were medicine men, they were builders. Those are the values. And Franz Fanon, he upheld those values. And these are the things that we need to teach our children as well. Don't teach them to be so narrow minded, because when you and I talk, you would maybe have a tendency to say, oh, you're a psychologist, you're the expert. But that's the problem, Bakari. We have institutionalized common sense. Everything is in an institution. And you will only accept what I'm saying because I'm the expert, but you are an expert. You have your lived experience as well.
That's
We
right.
come together and we have an exchange. I learn from you, you learn from me, because I don't have all the knowledge. So I would hope that we could really start seriously thinking about ourselves and the fact that we need to be different things, not just one thing. And I'm going to give you another example. I visited the St. Martin Academy recently. These are students who are 15 and 16 and 17 years. You know what they told me?
What's that?
I hate this type of education that we are getting. They say it's so academic. They said they're just they said they are not focusing on other skills. Like, how can we be kind human beings? What life skills do we need? They said everything is so academic, academic. We need to take stock. We need to listen and pay attention. So we are called to action, Bakari, to really do things differently and not to simply adopt and copy the values and traditions of the West. I'm not saying we disregard everything, because that's not realistic. We are still part of the kingdom. We are in a global village, and that's another discussion. We talk about things so like power. That's another discussion. But at the same time, we need to be conscious and aware of the fact that we center and we worship another society's education, their language, their identity at the expense of our own. That's wrong. That should not be.
So something I need to point out, right, is that while there are some who would who can change their accent based on where they're at, I have seen a growth of literature, the promotion of St. Martin phrases.
That's
You
right.
see, so I have to highlight that also, that because I know a few persons who are literally creating a brand from that. You see,
Awesome.
with the t-shirts and different speeches and such. I have to give credence to that, who are intent and intentional about preserving, the uniqueness of our language, right? And then to come back to language a bit, because I mean, I sometimes I'm guilty of it when I hear my brothers or sisters, let's say from different parts of the island speak. I'm like, whoa, you know. I don't think this community had much contact with with everyone else, and I say that because the richness of the language is still intact.
That's right.
Um, just like you, whenever the time comes around, every year we go to visit the festival in Colombia, the Arud Festival.
Mhm.
And let me tell you, sometimes when I'm having a conversation with those seniors of that community, I pull out my recorder,
Yeah,
right? And I'm not only pulling out my recorder to get the information, but I'm pulling out my recorder to save the voice, the tones, the expressions. You see? because sometimes I wonder, you know, after my generation, for example, if I'm still going to hear that richness.
Mhm,
You see,
mhm,
I still wonder sometimes because there is a move towards the, let's call it, well, I guess it depends on what genre you're in. I see an evolution in our language, but it comes more from like the dance hall. You
mhm.
know, if you're doing soca, all of a sudden people want to sound like, are you doing soca of calypso? You want to sound like, persons from the Eastern Caribbean or the Southern Caribbean. And I'm saying, well, we still have to do a good job or a better job for people to hear that Saint Martinness.
Yeah,
You understand what I'm saying?
yeah,
And I think that's I think that's crucial. You understand? I think that's very, very crucial because within our language, there is a story as to how we arrive at a particular word or a particular
definitely,
expression. You know,
definitely.
I was X years old when I really sat down and understood about Johnny Cake.
Mhm,
You understand? And I think this is something that you brought up several times in your
mhm,
presentation, that it was actually journey cake.
mhm,
You
mhm,
understand? Because our ancestors had to go from one part of the island to the other. And of course, one way of preserving their food was to create, this dough which could go with them and be prepared
mhm,
on the
mhm,
bayside. So
mhm.
just by the very phrase, the phrase in itself captures, right? It captures a part of our experience, right? And it also captures what we did to survive within within that phrase alone. You
Of
understand what I'm saying?
course,
And
of
that's why
course,
I always love that.
of
I
course.
always love that. And I bring it up even stronger now because of Fanon.
Yeah,
Because he is saying if we have to get rid of what is European, then we must then become more serious about discovering what is ours. And we have to be
definitely.
brave enough to part ways with that which does not serve us.
That's
You
right.
see, and that's something that really, really touched me because I've had conversations with some senior members of my family, and when they would have told me how they had to survive, what they had to go through to survive, whether it was catching their own food or being very innovative with, I mean, many persons ain't had pots. So they had to use a needle pan to cook their
Mhm,
food and so forth. You understand what
mhm,
I'm saying? So it
mhm.
develops an appreciation for what is ours. You
The
see,
very fact that you and I are here having this conversation, understanding the assignment, proves that we come from a people, despite the cruel things that were done to them, not only survived but also thrived.
that's
Because it's
right.
not only about survival, it's also about thriving. Franz Fanon did that. Marcus Garvey did that. A lot of our grandparents, people in our own St. Martin space, some of the elders, they come from that line as well. So it is very important for us that we do realize there were always people, despite the cruelty that was done to us, who always resisted and who always held on to the values and the traditions that sustained them. Franz Fanon did that, because all the while when he was writing his books and talking about what the colonial situation has done to us, in his book, he would keep saying, but that is not true. We are not inferior to. But it takes you and I, Bakari, and those others to understand that you and I, we are getting it. But not everyone is where you and I are, because there will be some people who are saying, well, why are they even having this conversation?
Correct.
And I understand that and I respect that. People are where they are and we have to respect that. But you and I, we have understood the assignment and we are doing what we have to do. And in so doing, one of my favorite quotes of Franz Fanon is, each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. I know what my mission is. You know what your mission is. We are certainly not betraying it. We are trying to fulfill it. That's what we are here for.
And that's one of my favorite quotes, right? And I want to backpedal or revisit something that you said when you said that he was so many things,
Mhm.
you know, and because he really used up his entire life and he placed it at the service of the liberation, not only of Algeria, you understand what I'm saying, but to the global south.
The global south.
The global south, you see.
Yeah.
And to show you, because as I get older, I really realize more and more that he was really about that life.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and when I say that, I want to share a quote with you that has
Mhm.
always shaped my thinking. I mean, especially in my time as a when I was general secretary, right? And when it come time for struggle, my quote was, any bystander or any spectator is a coward or a traitor.
Wow.
You
Yeah.
understand? That's something that
Yeah.
shaped my thinking. You
Yeah.
see, because if we are
Yeah.
talking about liberation, if we are talking about protecting our and preserving our rights, then it got to be all of us.
That's
You see,
right.
because at the end, all of us is going to benefit. You
That's
see,
the common cause.
that's
That's
the
the
common cause.
brotherhood. That's the
Yes,
sisterhood. These are the
exactly.
values that we need to embrace, not egoism, not individualism.
Correct.
That is what is now very rampant within our
That's
community. But we
correct.
have to go back to those values, and he understood that assignment, and that
Correct.
is how he lived his life. And so
Correct.
I
And
really admire him for that.
yeah,
Yeah,
and the thing is, he gives a great template
that's
because
right.
he became whatever the revolution needed.
That's right.
And see, and it speaks to what you said earlier about not specializing. Okay, not specializing, because he was so multifaceted, as you said. He was able to serve different needs at different times, at different instances. That's to me, that's what leadership is about. You understand what I'm saying?
Definitely.
And the fact that and what makes him so interesting is that you couldn't pin him down on a single ideology at a single point in time, you
No,
know. And I think
no.
that what makes him very, very interesting.
Yeah,
You see?
and it's the way he wrote his book,
Yeah.
because that was supposed to be his thesis, but it was rejected because it didn't fit the mold. So
Yeah.
what did he do? He thought outside the book, outside the box, and he thought, well, my message is still so important. I'm going to publish it in a book. And I
Yes.
feel that this is a template that you and I can definitely use
Oh,
today.
definitely.
We must not just stick to one thing. We can't just stick to one thing. Our society requires something else. I want to just give you this example also. I specialize in a certain type of psychology. But when I came back here, Bakari, I mean, I had to be a Jackina of different trades. I
Yes.
couldn't just stick to this one thing.
Correct.
You see, being in the Caribbean space, even though sometimes we try to emulate the West, our condition is still so different. We realize that it requires a certain creativity, a certain certain way of being, that we have to be able to do different things. So it's the same with doctors who come from where a doctor was telling me, a lot of European doctors who come, if they specialize in the lungs, when they're in St. Martin, they realize that they need to know a little bit about something else too. And
Yes.
so he said they come here and they work, and because they're only been educated in one thing, they're stuck there. So I feel that whatever type of education we get, whether that's in the formal space or informal, we need to create men and women who are flexible, men and women who can tap in, who can be so resourceful, like our grandparents, like our great grandparents, like in Hopetep, who were specialized in so many different things. That's the type of educational system that I envision. And you will not get it in the European education. Yes, our children need to go away to study, but what we have to do outside of the formal education, we have to take up our books. We have to talk to our mentors. We have to study. And when we study, we show ourselves approved. And then we realize that we have knowledge about other things. That shouldn't, so the Western education shouldn't limit us. We have so
Correct.
many resources in this day and age that even though we are psychologists, we could still be community organizers. We could still be herbalists. We can still, because it shouldn't limit us. And that is what Franz Fanon is teaching us. So yes, you have this structure, you have colonization, but if we are called to action, we have to step outside of that and do what we have to do in order for us to truly serve our community and serve our people. And that's it.
That's right. That's right. I want to point out that the wretched of the earth, right? Shortly after it was announced that Franz Fanon passed, the police rushed to the various bookstores to pull his work off of the shelf. Many in the global south considered this book to be the Bible of Third World Revolution.
That's right.
And I pointed out to say the following. Back then, it was illegal for us to read. Back then, they would ensure that certain books do not enter circulation.
That's right.
But today, I can order
Mhm.
10 copies of these books.
Mhm. And I
That's
have it
how,
here too.
thank you. Thank you. Okay?
Yeah.
That's how confident the system is. That's
Yeah.
how arrogant the system is, right?
Mhm.
But one thing I can say, and that's why, again, that's why I really love Fanon, is that, and it reminds me of something that George Lamming said,
Yeah.
is that I realized I was Black when I went to Holland.
Me too. Me too, Bakari. That was my experience. And it
Yeah,
was his too.
it was
It was
his own
yours and it
also.
was mine.
Correct.
Yeah, that's
And,
true.
and but but what was on the flip side was that information, at least in Holland, was not hidden. So when I would have gotten those questions, what I would call insults, right? Instead of retreating, it motivated me to go and dig up that which was not told. Because I had no more time to blame school. I had no time to blame nobody.
But
I had
Bakari, I need to plug in my I see my battery
sure,
is low.
sure,
So
sure, sure,
you
sure.
continue talking. I hearing you.
Okay, all right, all right. You know, so I didn't have any time to be blaming anybody for not teaching me more about my story because I was in a position. I would even say I was in a privileged position to be in a space where I could have gone and borrowed books and learn and study and read and share the information that I gathered to the point where now, when you're having conversations with your classmates who are from Holland or who from wherever part of the world they have to reconsider their initial position. They have to revisit their initial remarks because they thought all we did was sang One Love on the Beach. You
True.
understand what I'm saying? All day, every day, not understand that we have a civilization of our own.
That's
You
right.
see? So there are many ways to look at it, right? But ultimately, once you've had that aha moment, that consciousness raising or consciousness awareness moment, it compels one to act.
Definitely.
It always and the thing is, you want to learn more, and the more you learn, the more you want to share. And before you know it, you would have become an ambassador, a representative of your community. So by the time now they want to make a joke about St. Martin or St. Eustatius, they won't be able to do it in your presence.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? So that the next time that they have a conversation with someone from St. Martin or Station, they're gonna be like, well, chances are we can't come with these, remarks.
That's right.
And one thing I know about the Dutch is that if you don't go at them as hard as they come at you, they won't respect you. If you can't stand up on fact, right? If you don't know yourself, they are going to bend you up, fold you up, do exactly what you want once you have that particular position. And I say that because I am seeing but it's a different conversation, but we're going to get
Yeah.
to it. But I say that intentionally because when we look at what's happening in The Hague with their right-wing government, right? Given their particular temperament, if leaders on this rock don't make up their mind and understand who and what the enemy is, what's going to happen. And I think the writing, I have to read this particular essay by
Mm-hmm.
Geert Oost-Indie when he says decolonization, colonization, and recolonization. I have to read that essay. But that is
Mm-hmm.
what comes to mind
Mm-hmm.
if we
But
don't get our act together.
But the interesting thing, though, the right wing, the Netherlands, they are just continuing to center themselves, are they not? We can't really blame them.
We
The
no, I
fact that
don't.
the fact that the right wing is in there means that it reflects the views of the people of that community. But then
Understood.
but then this is where we come in indeed as leaders and as people of St. Martin. Whenever anything go wrong, oh, let the Dutch come. But then we don't understand that when we say let the Dutch come, we we are saying, but they're so much better than us. They know how to do things. But when the Dutch come, the Dutch ain't centering us. The Dutch ain't centering our values, and now the Dutch don't even ask us what is our norms and our values. They come with their own. So, like Franz Fanon, we certainly have a responsibility
That's
to
right.
know who we are, because in the book Black Skin, White Mask, he speaks about a gentleman by the name of Jean. Jean, as he said, does not understand his race. He doesn't understand who he is. And as long as our leaders, and we have different types of leaders, do not understand who they are, where they came from, these things are going to continue to happen. We are called to action. And that is what I love about Franz Fanon, because in Black Skin, White Mask, he was preaching kumbaya. Yes, you need the European and the Black to reach to this new humanity, but in the wretched of the earth, the agency is on us.
Correct.
We are the ones. Let us not just continue the aggression and the violence and the things that were done to us.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happened to us then, a lot of us, we are perpetrating these things. And that is where this consciousness comes in. We, Bakari, are called to action. So I taken the Dutchman out of this right now. I taken
Mm-hmm.
the other European out of this. But this is about us. What do we want? Do we know who we are? Do we know where we want to go? Actually, are we still suffering from an inferiority complex, or do we see ourselves as equal? Because if we see ourselves as equal, there's no way we're going to say, let them come. We will say, we have to solve our problems. It's good to get help, It's nothing
Yes,
wrong
that's
with
correct.
getting help.
That's correct.
That's not what I'm saying. But if we see ourselves as men and women with the same blood running through our veins, like an American, like a Dutch person, like a French person, I believe we will do so much more, and we will understand our assignment, and we will create the type of society that we really want and need. That's my firm belief. And that is how Franz Fanon lived his life. He didn't just sit back and, oh, this and that. He evolved, and he was part of the struggle. He died young, but he accomplished so much in his short lifespan. And he accomplished so much that today, in 2024, you and I are talking about the ideas of Franz Fanon and how these ideas are so applicable to us. And as I told you offline, and I probably said it at the beginning of the program, this was so therapeutic for me, because going over the words and making the comparisons to now and how even I operate at times, and the people around me operate. I said, he wrote these books back in the 1950s and what have you, but some of the things that he talked about then are still so meaningful. And so I encourage those who are watching and those who are listening, if you do not have a copy of Black Skin, White Mask and The Wretched of the Earth and their other books, please order these books online. Order them on Amazon, or ask Bakari. Bakari have it. Or ask me, those of you who know me. I think it is our assignment, it is our duty to read these books. And you're going to have to read it more than once, because a lot of
Yes.
the things that he says, it's like, did I get it? No, I don't think so. And you have to go back and read. And I feel that some of the teachings in his book should continue to be part of our discussion. And to give you another example, I am sure psychology courses are taught at USM, but I am sure, I am almost 100, no, I'm 150% sure that Franz Fanon, Naim Akbar, they have a lot of other psychologists, psychiatrists, also from the West and also from the global South, who are not even mentioned in
Mhm.
psychology courses. These persons weren't mentioned to me. I had to step outside of the formal
That's right.
courses to find them. So it's our
That's right.
duty to find them. That's our duty. That's on us.
Let me ask you this question because you brought up one of my favorite books by Naim Akbar, which is Know Thyself. And my mother here saying I must bring back her book from Franz Fanon.
Good. So your mother could read it again, you see?
Right? But you that was one of my favorite books, right? And in the particular book, he presents a model.
Mhm,
The model is there are three phases, if my
mhm,
memory serves me right. There is deconstruction, and I hope I'm saying it good.
mhm.
Deconstruction, reconstruction, and construction.
Something like that. Yes. The process that you go through to unlearn and to relearn. That's what you're
Correct.
talking about.
That's
Yes.
correct.
That's
That's
correct.
correct. Right?
Yes.
And I think staying within the paradigm of Fanon is that he had to deconstruct his idol worship of that which is French, and
Yeah.
he had to then replace it with that which is on his own, and then based on that, he constructed a new reality. But he
That's
had
it.
to have that courage because sometimes we don't want to do because of pain, but also because of fear, because we know what we're going to find.
That's true.
You understand? It's something
That's
out of
true.
fear too, you see?
Mm-hmm.
But we
Mm-hmm.
have to be courageous and question though. And that's why I love reggae music. I mean, when I say reggae music, I don't mean what they have going on today,
No.
right? Because the reggae music that I know had glorified
Mm-hmm.
everything that could uplift the black man and the black woman.
That's right.
Reggae music today has taken a different turn.
Turn.
And
Yeah.
to touch on one of the topics you want to talk about on colorism, we see the
Mm.
highest, brightest, lightest complexion girls who are closely resembling European extract being glorified in reggae music today and thing. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that ain't how we start. That ain't
Mm-hmm.
foundation,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
when we go back to its roots and foundation, right? It was always about raising awareness. I had a talk with the son of Papa Godet,
Uh-huh.
and he was telling me that they were introduced to Marcus Garvey by way of Steel Pulse and Burning Spear and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because even the artists them have a responsibility. It's just not art anymore.
No, no,
You see,
no.
calypso. Right now, I think calypso is one of the most revolutionary genres, if done
Mm-hmm.
correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are doing a great job with their
Mm-hmm.
social and political
Mm-hmm.
commentary.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a bit much, but we love them still. We love their creativity. But we
Yeah.
all have a role to play, and that's why I bring it up because you don't know who's gonna be impacted by your interaction, by your poem, by by your involvement or whatever have you. So,
Yeah.
and that's the reason I bring it up for us to not only find ways to open our minds up to different interpretations of the world, but be courageous about it.
Be
You see,
courageous. And
be
that's
courageous about it.
yeah. And that's the thing that you mentioned. Indeed, colorism was something we wanted to talk about,
Yeah.
linking it back. But it's all right, linking it back to the white ideal, that people had to repress their black cells and act white in order to be successful in the world. And so the more light skin you are, the more human you feel. And then when we draw the parallels with today, we see even within our own society, there's this struggle among us, light skin, dark skin,
Oh,
you
yes.
know, and I even hear it in the St. Martin discourse, you know, in the politics. It's so strange. About 2 weeks ago, you know, so I'll try to make it as abstract as possible. Persons were having a conversation, and then they were saying, yeah, they want to keep the black boys out, and only people of a certain hue, I guess, you know, I light skin, you know, people of a certain hue are the ones who want to have power and Martin. If you really look at that, the black boy and the black girl, they exclude. That's colorism. That's colorism, Bakari. We talk about it in a, you know, in our own discourses here, and I think that that is something that we need to be aware of and realizing that that comes from somewhere.
That's
That,
correct.
you know, it comes from somewhere where we feel that the lighter skin we are, the more important we are, the more human we are, and not embracing that. But then they have this thing among us where we are fighting against each other because our hue is not the same. Black people have different hues.
That's right.
You're black, I'm black, we are black. But then we make this distinction and then we look down on, you know, the things that were done to us as some of the things that we do. And that's what Fanon talks about
Thank you.
again.
Thank
He
you.
talks about that. If we
That's
are
right.
simply um, becoming
Repeating.
independent in our mind,
Mhm.
without liberating our minds, realizing that we need to come with a different construct,
Yes.
all we will be doing would be repeating. And all some of us are doing is be repeating. We need to be mindful of this colorism thing that we are engaging in this community, how we talk about each other, what we teach our children. Because to give you an example, I could never forget this. There was this one client I had, dark skin of a darker hue, you know, and my walls were painted white. And then, you know, we're talking about things, and she was not happy about who she was. And she said she hates her color because people, children call her black, and you know, we are doing the same thing. People, children are calling her
Mhm.
black, and so I asked her, well, but then what color would you want to be? She turned to the wall. She looked at the wall. My walls were white, painted white at the time. And she said,
Mm.
as white as the wall.
Wow.
Now, that is
Wow.
serious. We don't see these things today, but they play out in the conflicts we have among ourselves about color. Look in it with movie roles, and so arguing about someone like Zoe Sultan, whatever her name was,
Yes,
a
yes,
lighter
yes.
skinned woman playing a certain role, and then they're not putting darker skinned women. Come on, we need to look beyond these things. This is
Mm.
part of the colonial condition. This is the conditioning, and we really need to raise our consciousness and realize that we are all equal and we are all human beings, and we come in different shades, we come in
Yeah.
different sizes. Let's not pit each other against each other. We are not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to repeat the violence and aggression that were perpetrated towards us. We should not repeat that among each other. So we have a lot of work to do. Our conversations have to continue, Bakari, and I do want to commend you, you know, with your podcast. I know you're very faithful with this thing. You know, I feel that that is definitely a way to go about these things where we address these issues, and hopefully we will raise the consciousness in those who are open and brave enough to embrace this, because it requires bravery. And that's something we can definitely learn from Franz Fanon. He was so brave, was such a courageous man, you know? So,
I totally agree. One last thing before we wrap up.
mhm,
One last thing. And I want to speak to the impact of colonialism
mhm,
to the point where we spend so much time with a colonizer,
mhm,
we took on her traits. Franz Fanon said something in Black Skin, White Mask that I will never, ever, ever forget, where he says that the colonized, he envies the colonizer. He wants his house, he wants his material possessions, and he even wants his wife.
mhm,
And he says that he not only want these things because they are, and I'm paraphrasing here, right? Not because they are nice, but he wants to be in a position to then oppress his own brothers and
And
sisters.
sisters.
So you want to occupy power not because it's, for your dignity, your quality of life, but you know in turn you want to feel that fullness of being a man or whatever. You want to use this power to exploit and oppress your very own. I'm
Wow.
going to I'm going to leave it at that
Wow.
because that is what I just see right here on St. Martin
Happening today.
happening today.
Today.
Okay, but I'm going to leave that and I'm going to leave it there for spite,
Yeah.
right? So that you can come back on again.
Yes. The conversation continues. The conversation continues.
Indeed, indeed. Well, Xiomara, thank you so much. I don't know if you have any closing remarks. I don't know if you
Just
do.
that this too again, this conversation with you again was for me also very therapeutic because I learned a lot of things from you today, and I'm hoping that those who tuned in and those who will listen eventually, because it's recorded, will learn something and that it would evoke something within them, realizing that we come from greatness and that we are greatness and that there's none better than ourselves. There are none better than ourselves. We are all human beings. And I think we need to embrace our Creole. We need to embrace the color of our skin. We need to embrace each other. And I think when we do that, when we start on that journey, I believe that our communities would become better communities. And one other thing is, I feel that evolution is lifelong. As long as we have breath, because of our experiences, because of the mentors, because of the people we come across along the way, it helps us to evolve and to become better human beings. And better human beings, not just to serve our own interests, because Franz Fanon did not believe in us serving our interests,
Correct.
but in us fighting for the common good, realizing that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. And I think if we could remember those things and try to apply those things to our lives and the space in which we are in right now, I believe that St. Martin will become a better place.
All right.
Those are my closing thoughts.
All right. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. As I tell you, even when I brought forward the topic to you, and then when we had our, meeting a few days
Mhm.
ago as to how we're gonna tackle this topic, I was like every day revisiting the works of Franz, and I was like, boy, there's so much
So
I
much.
overlooked.
Mhm.
There's so much I have to reabsorb again because of different experiences. So
Mhm.
I gotta thank you also, for inspiring that. And of course, I need to have you back. It don't have to be next week. It don't have to be the week after, but I need to have you back because we have to continue this
Continue.
conversation. You see,
Yeah.
because I think there are too many people who aren't aware of the Honorable Franz Fanon,
Yeah.
right? And as you know, we don't need no permission from nobody to celebrate our heroes and sheroes.
That's
You
right.
understand what I'm saying? Because my great aunt in Grenada would always say you must give children food because you can be feeding the next prime minister. You understand what I'm saying? You can be feeding the next doctor and so forth. So by these discussions, you never know who listening, who becomes inspired, and who will answer that call to action. So
Sure.
I gotta thank you for being the guest,
Thank
and
you too.
looking forward to the next time, of course. So, ladies and gentlemen, that does it for today. But remember that we are coming back tomorrow, God's willing, where I'll be having some guests from the St. Martin Museum, and we'll be talking about identity and not and its place in no, sorry, let me rephrase. We'll be talking about the St. Martin Museum, and more specifically, its role when it comes to identity, nation building, and national development. The week after, I'll be joined by Mr. Renate Bryson, and we're going to have a lively discussion about vote selling on the island, because at times I am still under the impression that the elect members of the electorate or not taking this as serious as it should. So we want to explore that even further and see what we get out of that conversation. And again, if you are looking for a life coach, yoga enthusiast, if you like yoga, please be sure to check out. And of course, if you want to learn more about stress management, conflict resolution, or just some tips to help you, be able to reach some goals, please go and check out Mindful Elevation Caribbean. And of course, you can always send Dr. Ramonda Hansa a message, and you all can set up an appointment and have a talk and see how she could best support your particular goals. Well, folks, I will leave you in the words of the most honorable, right, and excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And he says, "Up, you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will. One God, one aim, one destiny."